want to turn up the music? Great, can everyone? I call this October 1 p.m. on October 20th, 2022. We'll be taking the means of signing sheets that are outside. Has everyone here signed in who's a senator or an alternate? Please make sure you sign in because it's important for today's elections. Thank you. For Matt Hyatt, Shane Burrow, Ahmed Wahab, James Madden, sorry, children, Allison Zhu for Kelly Racine, Carl Motzenbacher for Heather Kurt Ballard, Shangli Chen for Louis Muhammad, and Judith Sylvester for Robert Mann. Are there any alternates that I haven't noted? Secretaries will have the quorum. Wonderful, we have the quorum. So today we feature two guest speakers. We have Provost Costello, Chair of LSU Press Committee, who will give a brief presentation about the committee and all the great work that they do. So thank you so much for being here. Provost Hagley, who will discuss the needs of this project for the university, which is going to keep it in the next academic year. Public comments at this meeting. The Secretary's draft of the minutes was circulated via email. Are there any corrections to the minutes as distributed? If there are no corrections to the minutes, sorry. Yeah. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from September 20th meeting? Second, we move to discussion. So let's move on to the vote. So to approve the minutes, please say aye. Or opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Okay, so Vada, right? From Vada, yeah, from Wexford is abstaining. The minutes from September 20th, Faculty Senate meeting are approved. Dear Senators, I hope that you feel less burdened today with the submission of midterm grades. Behind you. But also know that the Faculty Senate Executive Committee has been very busy and our to-do list has been further intensified. I have several items I'd like to share with you. I am very happy to report that we have offered the position of Senate Coordinator to Sarah Williamson-Richard. She's in the back. Sarah began her position at this past Monday, October 17th. She comes to us with a wealth of knowledge and skills. She received her bachelor's degree in English from University of Lafayette and a law degree from Southern University. We are thrilled to welcome her to Faculty Senate, and I feel less burdened on the work I've been doing. That's the university meeting. Last week, this meeting was shared with the executive committee base budget, which will take into effect in the fall of 23. I have been appointed to a working group that is currently implementing a proposal from the last year by the graduate school to raise the floor of graduate stipends to $23,000 for 4 years. These discussions are ongoing, and it has been agreed that the information is not yet ready for public dissemination. I do know in this committee as a representative of all faculty, including those who perceive interests underserved by the new model. Provost will be joining us later and we'll take a broader picture of the university's new zero-based budget model. Update on SCR6. The meeting in the task force to study tenure is scheduled for October 25th at the Capitol. Last week, Vice President Danielle Terrell and I were part of an internal meeting at LSU to strategize about our position at the upcoming meeting. We put together last year of various items and policies that already exist at LSU protecting tenure. First, on the agenda of October 25th meeting, it looks like it will be purely procedural, scheduling meetings for the rest of the year and appointing a vice chair to the task force. It's open to the public. I encourage you to join me in attending some of these. If you're interested, please feel free to contact me and I'll share with you the details. The next item is standing committee appointments. Thank you so much to those of you who sent out survey asking faculty to partake in committee participation. The executive committee, most of the faculty are putting space to that survey. And we also that were requested by the upper administration. We were in touch with standing committee chairs with some ongoing business matters, and I'm planning to have each committee give a brief report on the great work that they are doing. We will keep the initiative off today with a brief presentation by Vice President Danielle Terrell, which will be a presentation by Brandon Costello, who's the current chair of LSU Press Committee. Open meetings law. To address some of the confidentiality issues for our standing committees that are also subject to open meetings law. Advice that moving forward, particularly with LSU Press Committee and Adjudication Committee and Appeals Committee, that we should be going into executive sessions at each meeting. The last item is consulting rights. LSU is moving forward with a planning of the library, which is bright spot. This plan is for the last year in students on the vision of the library. The plan has now moved to faculty. Faculty members were invited last week to attend the Zoom meeting with the firm. And I apologize, I didn't make that date. It fell on the day where grades were due. This is the ground. This project is overdue. It was thrilling to see it taking shape. You continue to be engaged in all issues on campus. Thank you for all of your help in the past month with committee appointments. I also appreciate the feedback, concerns, and comments I received from you. Please keep them coming as you continue to be my source of eyes and ears. Thanks to you, our job on the executive committee is more efficient and relevant to our continued efforts to active shared governance on our campus. This concludes my report. Are there any questions? Jeff, there's a microphone.
Yeah, so not a question, but a comment. Phil Otter sent a message to the AUP group earlier. The SCR6 October meeting has been postponed to November.
Really?
Just came this afternoon.
Well, thank you so much. You have some ideas. Jeff, thank you so much. Well, I just said so a few minutes ago, it was still on. Yeah, thank you.
Hey, John King from College of Agriculture. I was wondering if you were going to be doing the elections for the adjudication committee soon, because there's 6 people whose terms were up in 2022, and usually we would have done it by this meeting.
Yeah, so it's supposed to work. Yeah, that is our agenda. With appointments for standing committees and also elections for standing committees, nominations, working through the list of senators that we had to express willingness to serve. So that will be coming up in fairly short order.
And I just had one more question. I noticed that minutes for the Faculty Senate Executive Committee have not been fully approved and posted yet. So I was wondering what the status of all the ones from August till now are.
Yes, can you hear me? Yeah, we were shorthanded as for obvious reasons. Everything will be posted in the next few days on the website. Yeah, we have them all. It's just they're not on. We're actually going to be taking a lot of time in the next few weeks to completely update the website, and actually the whole website is going to move to a beautiful new platform. So, so stay tuned.
Yeah, last month I was wondering if, because of that, if we could have sent the minutes to the Faculty Senate directly from the Faculty Senate Executive Committee.
I'm happy to do that. I can do all of them. I'm happy to do that. That would be great. Yeah, sure. Any other questions? So Senate standing committees and Vice President Danielle Terrell will make that presentation.
All right, thank you, President Bazayev. One of the real gratifying parts of learning these positions over the last couple months have been interacting with our standing committees and our ad hoc committees and getting to know really the wonderful faculty that we have serving in these important roles. As we've done so, a few things have sort of come to our attention that we wanted to bring to your attention about what we've noticed and some of the plans we have for moving forward as to how we think we can improve further the functioning of the Senate and the committees. And that's the intention of what we would like to communicate to you today. So we all understand, in essence, what the committee is and what it's supposed to do. So the committee is charged with undertaking a piece of business, whether it be to consider, investigate, or take action on certain matters or subjects. And the committee enjoys particular advantages over the body of the whole in that it is more flexible, it's smaller, right? It's easier to convene the committee. It's easier to get individuals with subject area expertise on these committees, and it's just easier for them to operate. The trade-off for a body such as ours inherently is that when you utilize a committee, you are making a trade-off between representation and efficiency. The efficiency we gain from delegating some of these tasks to our committees is offset by the fact that the committees are not as representative as the Senate. And over time, what we has noticed is that efficiency to some degree has won. It is inherent in institutional design with institutional drift that committees want to gain autonomy from their principals, right? And if you think about it as a constellation, right, or as a universe, with the Senate at the center, there is a lot of centrifugal force on these committees, which over time sort of pushes them further and further away and gives them an increasing degree of autonomy. And if that centrifugal force is not offset by centripetal force, pulling them back in, it's easy for that relationship to become severed. And so how do we get back into equilibrium where we are maximizing efficiency as well as representation to make sure that faculty are being truly represented in the way that only the Senate can do? So part of what we have done is gone back to the beginning and the governing documents of our committees and the Senate, right? Because this is what we think is the force that will help keep us bonded to our committees. And the relationship between the Senate, the FSEC, and the standing and special committees are governed by the Senate bylaws, the Faculty Senate Operating Committee procedures, and Robert's rules. The bylaws of the Faculty Senate establish the Senate standing committees and identify their charges. They also address other issues related to committee operations, such as term length, creation of special committees, and committee size. And committees may also create their own bylaws, provided, of course, that these bylaws do not violate any of the superior documents, such as the Faculty Senate bylaws. Some things that, as we were reviewing these documents, sort of struck us as perhaps over time had become a bit eroded or at least lost to the annals of history. Right? The FSEC may review standing committees each academic year to determine their active or dormant status based on current needs. So there should be an ongoing process here of determining which standing committees are required at any point in time. And that's something that we intend to undertake. Furthermore, the FSEC makes all appointments to non-elected standing committee positions and special committees unless otherwise specified. So when you create a special committee, it is possible that the motion that creates that committee can determine the method of appointment. In those cases, if it doesn't delegate it to the FSEC, we would follow those procedures. Otherwise, the FSEC has that authority. When there are questions about committee jurisdiction, those are decided by the FSEC. So in essence, the FSEC is sort of the controlling committee for all our other standing committees, kind of air traffic control for the Senate relative to our standing committees. But the Senate itself retains the ultimate authority over its committees. And to that end, the Senate may, by resolution, instruct a committee or reverse a committee action. So the representation, as always, resides with the Senate, right? We authorize our committees to undertake certain actions, but the ultimate authority of the committees is derived from the Senate, ultimately derived from the Faculty Council. But really, the Senate should be involved in a meaningful and substantive way in a lot of the action that is undertaken in the name of the faculty. That is not to say that the Senate should, of course, be exclusive, right? And in best practices for parliamentary procedure, in fact, we want to rely quite heavily on our committees and the important work that they do. So in terms of our approach to the main meetings, what we would really like to see is that most of the business that is initiated and reviewed within the Senate was initially developed within our committees. So using committees such as ASH, Courses and Curricula, the Benefits Committee, to take the mantle, develop the agenda for the Senate, develop these proposals, right, the resolutions, and then bring it to the Senate, having hashed out most of the difficult business, and then we can weigh in representing the faculty who have elected us to be here. So we really want to use our committees in a way to ease the burden on us. This is not really a body that is set up for substantive debate and deliberation. That is best conducted in the committees, but then use the authority of the Senate to approve or amend the proposals of the committees as necessary. How do matters get to the committee? Well, there's a number of different mechanisms. This does vary from committee to committee based on their own individual charges and bylaws. One thing that we would like to see is that if a faculty member does have a concern that they bring to the FSEC, we're going to direct them to the appropriate committee. And this has happened already a few times. They come and they say, hey, I'm concerned about this situation on campus. And we say, that sounds like a great issue for the Benefits Committee. We want to put you in touch with members of the Benefits Committee who then will be able to, initially hear this, come up with what they think is a reasonable response. Another designated office on campus can bring a matter to the committee's attention. So if it is the ASH committee, for example, units on campus may fill out a routing form requesting changes to admissions or other standards, right? And then they can initiate that process with the committee. Of course, in most cases, a committee member can also, of their own initiative, introduce business to the committee as well. So if you're on the Benefits Committee, this happened last year, right? Committee members decided that there were situations that they thought could be improved. They initiated a resolution, it passed out of committee, came to the Senate, and was ultimately approved through that channel. And finally, the Senate and the FSEC, using the delegated authority from the Senate that we enjoy in the Constitution and bylaws, can also refer matters to committee. So if there is a matter before the Senate that seems as if it would benefit from additional scrutiny and attention within a smaller venue, we have the option under Robert's rules to commit that matter to a committee and have them undertake the heavy lifting that needs to be done. Again, they do enjoy these benefits, flexibility, expertise, things like this. Then they can bring it back to the Senate once it's ready to come back to us. And so the FSEC has availed ourselves of this option already this year. This is also something we wanted to make sure the Senate was aware of. So that way, if it seems like we're having a discussion that is not productive and it would be more efficient to route this to a committee, that option is available to the Senate itself. How do we make sure that the Senate is kept abreast of what's going on in our committees? Well, the bylaws stipulate that each faculty Senate standing committee is to inform the Senate of its activities via the FSEC. And in April of each year is also supposed to submit a written report. That written report is posted to their website on the Faculty Senate website, which, as Anessa mentioned, is going to be undergoing a substantial revision, which will hopefully make it easier to navigate moving forward. However, we would also like to reintroduce standing committee reports to Senate meetings themselves, as we will see later today with Professor Costola, right? Obviously, we're not going to have every committee report every meeting, but we would like to see a rotation of committees, maybe 2 or 3, or if a committee has an important and pressing piece of business before it that they want to communicate to the Senate, make that time available for the committee to make that presentation so the Senate is always aware of what is being done in our name and under our authority. This will keep the senators more fully informed about the issues that are being and the work that's being done in our committees. And also, it will allow the Senate, when it deems it necessary, to exercise its authority to direct a committee or to reverse that action. So this way, nothing is ever done that runs contrary to the wishes of the Senate, right? Because the Senate, again, is the principal representative body in practice of the faculty. How do we want to implement this further? Well, as part of a comprehensive review that we are initiating now and will be continuing to undertake over the next few months, some of the questions we want to look at is how can we institute an effective committee on committees to allow for more effective and representative appointments to standing committees? We spend an inordinate amount of time simply trying to staff these committees because when fully staffed, our standing committees alone require about 110 faculty. You add onto that standing committees, you add onto that administrative committees that come and ask us for faculty. We really need a full-time and dedicated committee on committees to identify those faculty and then submit them to the FSEC for approval. So I know there's some issues with the prior iteration of the committee on committees. We'd like to figure out how we can reinstitute that and improve it. Are there opportunities to revive committee charges or combine certain committees to reduce the number of faculty needed to serve in those roles while also addressing the Senate's needs? We have some committees whose charges may overlap, and perhaps we can condense them. The fewer faculty we need, the easier it's going to be to fill these roles. Also, we will have less overlap and potentially creep here that could lead to jurisdictional issues. And so we want to see if there's some ways that we can either condense committees or maybe there's committees we need, we can remove 2 and substitute 1 that ultimately will fill in a gap that may currently exist. And finally, how can we more clearly delegate responsibility for certain tasks to specific committees while retaining the Senate's authority to provide oversight and approval? FSEC has no intention of coming in and micromanaging our committees. The Senate shouldn't be micromanaging our committees, right? We trust our faculty to do their jobs and to do the work that they have been charged to do. At the same time, we want to make sure that you as the Senate are informed about what is being done. Where can we find, again, that equilibrium between representation and efficiency where we are getting the best of both worlds and making sure that when something is passed on campus and they say, yeah, faculty were involved, this came with faculty approval, that we make sure that that faculty approval was substantive, right? And it was meaningful. So that is what we would like to do. Those are sort of our intentions. If you are a member of a committee and would have some suggestions about things you would like us to look at on your committee, please do bring that to our attention. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address those briefly at this point. Yes.
I had an idea of maybe you could have standing committee chairs serve as the committee on committees because they know best what they need within their own committees. So that might be a possible solution to that problem.
Yeah, no, that is, I mean, that's an excellent suggestion. We certainly want to work closely with the committee chairs to find out what their needs are, and we have had some of those discussions. We also don't want to overburden committee members, right, who already have a large charge as the committee chair. So we certainly want to hear them. We want to be responsive to their needs. They are the ones who are best going to be able to inform us as to, right, I need someone from engineering, I need this expertise. So they are absolutely going to be an important part. Whether we make them the committee on committees, I mean, that's certainly something we can take under advisement. Yeah. Thank you for that.
I understand you don't want to overburden them.
Yeah. I mean, we have to keep in mind these are all volunteers, yes, right? So they're doing incredible work at great cost, and we want to be respectful of their time and effort.
One thing I was curious about that I forgot to ask while Anessa was up there was the resolution 2112, where a committee was supposed to be formed to look at the bylaws and constitution. Has that committee been formed yet?
We've reached out to faculty to assess their interest in serving on that committee. We've identified a number of faculty who have indicated that interest, that we're going to take that up at our next meeting to officially create that ad hoc committee and give it its charge. So it's just been caught up in the backlog that Anessa indicated earlier, which I have no doubt that the presence of Sarah is really going to help us address.
And the last comment, sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
I would be careful about trying to merge committees because they have particular areas that they're supposed to be looking at.
Sure.
So this may not be a good idea to merge committees together.
Yeah, no, I mean, we certainly want to be careful about how we do this because these committees do exist for a specific reason, right? So there was a need for which the committee was created that the committee should address. Again, with the sort of the concern about institutional creep, sometimes, charges expand or the way in which the charge is implemented, it expands. So sometimes it's just going back to actually what's in the bylaws and saying, okay, this is actually what you should be looking at. This is what you should be looking at. And just getting back to sort of the nuts and bolts of how these things should be undertaken. But point taken. Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
If you could be sure to say your name and college. Lori Beatty, College of Music and Dramatic Arts. My question is there a minimum or a maximum number of people that are expected to be on each committee?
So each committee does have a unique and specific number of faculty. In the bylaws, it specifies that most committees should be between 6 and 9 faculty. Under parliamentary procedure, you could have a committee of 1. It can be as few as that. But for the faculty senate committees, generally they tend to be between 6 and 9. And it seems that full representation across units is considered to be 9 faculty, 1 from each of the major units on campus. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time and attention. And again, if you have any concerns or questions about the committees, please do feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.
Okay, our next presenter is Brennan Costello, who's the chair of LSU Press Committee, and he will briefly speak to about his committee and all the great work that they're doing. Thank you so much, Brennan, for being here.
Yeah, thanks for this invitation to be here to talk about the work of the LSU Press Committee. Working on the press committee for the past several years has made something abundantly clear to me that I think we might take for granted. Those of us who've been around LSU for a while, which is that the LSU Press is really one of the jewels in the university's crown. It's a vital contributor to LSU's high profile in the international scholarly community and a big part of building LSU's reputation as a place for scholarship and research. The press publishes books in a wide range of academic fields. It does popular culture and media studies, cultural geography, but the areas that it is best known for are literary studies, poetry, like original poetry, and most of all history, especially Civil War history and the history of the U.S. South more generally. The press boasts 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry, and its works of Civil War history are regular finalists and winners for top academic history awards. The press also does a thriving book trade business with cookbooks and books of local interest as well. So what is the role of the press committee in the whole publishorial world of the LSU Press? The committee is made up of faculty from all across the university, but with a special emphasis on faculty members representing the fields in which the press most frequently publishes. As you all know, a scholarly publisher like LSU Press relies on a rigorous peer review process in order to ensure that its books are of the very highest quality. The primary function of the press committee is to essentially review the peer review process. To ensure that manuscripts that the press wishes to publish have been properly vetted, revised, and approved through careful and thorough peer review. I don't think I need to explain the process of peer review to this group, so I'm going to skip the part of the talk that explains what peer review is. I'm sure you'll appreciate that. The press committee meets about 6 times in each academic year. At each meeting, we review a slate of generally 10 to 15 projects that have been through the peer review process and that the editors feel are ready for publication. The press committee does not conduct a peer review on the manuscript itself. Instead, we closely examine the peer review evaluations, the author's written responses to those evaluations, and the peer reviewers' responses to the revised manuscript. The identities of peer reviewers are, of course, not known to the author, but they are known to the press committee, and this is important, right, as it allows us to determine if the peer reviewers selected are appropriately knowledgeable in the field, whether certain of their objections or criticisms might stem from philosophical or methodological differences with the author, and so forth. If the press committee, after conversation and consideration, determines that the peer review process has been appropriate, rigorous, thorough, and so on, then the manuscript is approved for publication. I appreciated hearing that there has been some movement in our conversations with the General Counsel's office about the problems that the current open meeting guidance poses to committees like ours and adjudication and some of the others. So I'm really grateful to the faculty senate leadership for bringing that up. Obviously, anonymity is really key to the working of peer review and thus to all the good work that the LSU press does. Certainly, those of us on the press committee, as well as the members of the staff and administration of the LSU Press, were concerned about having our meetings in which the identities of peer reviewers are necessarily going to be discussed open to the public, right? I mean, it might seem unlikely that a author would choose to come to a meeting at which their book is being discussed, but you probably all have at least one colleague who would do that if they could. Right. I'm not saying you're that colleague. If you don't know which colleague that is, you might be that colleague. But even not assuming bad faith, right? If members of the public are there because they're interested, then it's always possible for things that should not be divulged in a wider context to be divulged. And that might have a chilling effect on the integrity and honesty of peer review and make it harder for the press to recruit good peer reviewers, right? If people are worried that their identities might become known without them, against their wishes, then that will make it harder for the press to recruit good peer reviews. So I'm very glad to hear that that's going on. That's what the press committee does in very broad strokes. I don't know if I should offer to answer questions or if anyone has a question, I can answer it. As long as you can answer it. Mike Russo.
So do I understand the committee does not review the manuscripts?
No. Occasional individual members might be chosen as a peer reviewer, but that is not part of the committee's job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you find that is a problem?
No. No.
So you're able to evaluate the review process without knowing what's in the manuscript.
Yeah, I mean, generally the peer reviews that we're receiving the full peer review, which includes generally summary comments as well as, very often line by line notes, right? So, our job is not to go back and say, did this reviewer, is this point they made 100% accurate? Is to say, well, here's what they did. Did the author actually respond to this? Is the peer reviewer, upon being sent the manuscript again, happy with it? And is the editor, now
Because all that's the job of the editor, right?
Well, that's the editor brings us the manuscript with not the manuscript, but brings us that portfolio of material from peer review at the end, and then we just sort of determine if the editor has done a good job of guiding it through peer review. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. No problem. Yes. But you have to use the microphone. Oh, you fancy.
I have fancy microphone. How often do you, does it depend on the year and the amount of?
We generally meet 6 times a year, usually about 3 times per semester. Maybe in some semesters only meet twice, but we will sometimes have a summer meeting, especially if, just to try to, the press doesn't take the summer off, and it slows the pipeline down if we can't tell them anything between May and September, so sometimes we'll meet in the summer.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
All right, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move to table, Provost Hagerty's, presentation for this year. So he's not trying to digest. So. Okay. Table. Yeah.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is the table for the presentation, or a second.
All those in favor, say aye. All those against? Okay. So the next item is business. It's the second resolution 2207, participation in consortium of universities studying slavery, sponsored by Faculty Senate Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, Cultural Studies Group, the Department of History, and the Women's Gender and Sexuality Studies Program. Ted Shockley will represent everyone.
Should I go ahead? You go. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Kat Jacquet. I'm the chair of the Faculty Senate DEI Committee. So President Bazayev, I am pleased to report that the DEI Committee has been informed by Academic Affairs that LSU will join the consortium, and therefore, on behalf of the committee and other sponsors, I ask permission to withdraw the motion to adopt Resolution 22-07.
Unless there's an objection to this motion, I move that permission to withdraw the motion be granted.
For a motion to allow these sponsors.
So my question.
Just the motion to grant permission to the sponsors of the resolution, permission to withdraw. Is there such a motion? Motion by Leonard Ray. Motion to grant permission is not. It is seconded by the original author or the original sponsor of the motion. It is not a minute, so we will proceed directly to the vote.
Okay, so all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, say nay. Abstention? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Okay, that's- We now are proceeding to the second reading of Resolution 2208, revision to Article 6, election of officers of the LSU Faculty Senate Bylaws, sponsored by the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, and it will be read by Prampreet Singh. Let me pull it up. Actually read it from here. And try to read it from here. It's easier.
Okay, hi, I'm Param Singh. This resolution, which had the first reading last time, is designed to make the election of the new member at large in Faculty Senate Executive Committee more friendly towards the new senators. So generally what has happened in past is that we have elected the new member at large in the very first meeting from the new senators. And many times, most of the new senators are in the Senate only for the first time and they don't know the procedures. So the idea is to make it slightly later, and I will read the resolution, and there were some comments last time and which have been added into this resolution. So revision to Article 6, election of officers of the LSU Faculty Senate bylaws, sponsored by Faculty Senate Executive Committee. Whereas the Faculty Senate Executive Committee provides leadership for the Senate and consists of the president, the vice president, the secretary, 3 at-large members, and the ex-president as an ex officio member. Whereas the election of the president, the vice president, the secretary, and 2 members at large of Faculty Senate Executive Committee happens in the April Faculty Senate meeting. Whereas the election of 1 at-large member is carried out in the first meeting of the fall semester from the newly elected senators to the Senate. Whereas the orientation of the new senators generally occurs after the first fall meeting of the Senate. Whereas the notification of new senators is sometimes sent to the Senate by respective colleges and units close to the first fall Senate meeting. Whereas the election in April meeting is facilitated by a nomination committee, and such a committee is difficult to convene before the first meeting of the fall term. And whereas the new senators elected to the Senate in the fall include many who are serving as senators for the first time and are thus not fully aware of the election procedures and opportunities to become part of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee. Therefore, be it resolved that the election of one at-large member of the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, which is carried out in the first meeting of the fall term, be carried out in the second or the October meeting of the fall term, whichever occurs first, to provide a warm-up period for the new senators to avail themselves of opportunities to run for important roles in the Senate and seek election in the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, and resolve that the last 2 sentences of Article 6.2 of LSU Faculty Senate bylaws, which currently read, the agenda for the first meeting of the fall term, which include the election of the 1 newly elected senator to fill the 3rd at-large position on the FSEC. At the first meeting, nominations will be open and the elections held. Be revised to read, the agenda for the 2nd or the October meeting of the fall term, whichever occurs first, will include the election of 1 newly elected senator to fill the 3rd at-large position on the FSEC. At the 2nd or the October meeting of the fall term, whichever occurs first, nominations will be open and the elections held. So if there are any questions or concerns, like.
Yeah, this motion has already moved and seconded, so we were now in the discussion period.
I was wondering how this is going to affect the length of the terms of everybody on the Faculty Senate Executive Committee, because if this person's starting a whole month late, we're going to get shorted their term on the Faculty Senate Executive Committee.
So the idea is that if this person will be elected, let us say in October, the person will continue till the next October.
So you'll have one of the members at large continuing for an extra month while the other 2 are not on.
Mm-hmm.
So you will have a lopsided Faculty Senate Executive Committee, which is something that Jeff had brought up before. And he was saying he wanted to stay on.
So in effect, like this will partly address the issues which we had, which were in the Jeff's case, because like the person who will be elected in October will continue till October unambiguously. People who will be elected in April, they will just serve their full term. So I'm sorry, I don't see the confusion here.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have people serving different terms. They won't all be on the same term.
Yeah.
Well, that's always been the case.
Yeah.
Right? Because under the prior model, the individual who was elected in August or September. So for example, Jeff was elected in September, and it was argued by some that he should rotate off in August. Well, he had a term that was then truncated, and by design would be less than 12 months, and the Constitution explicitly stipulates that terms are 12 months. So in fact, this will allow for continuity by not having a gap between the end of the summer term and the first meeting of the Senate in August, particularly since, as we know, those August meetings tend to delay given weather circumstances, potential hurricane, something like that. So we actually view this as allowing for full staffing of the FSEC for an entire year, rather than having a defined period in the beginning of the academic year where we are structurally down to 5.
I think the main motivation here is that we want to make the process more friendly to the new senators. Like as an example, like when I joined, or when like there are people who joined this time, like sometimes it just comes like a shock that there are faculty members who are serving in the Senate for the very first time. There is no orientation which has happened before that for senators. And then they are asked on the spot whether you want to run for this position or not. Many of us, of the new senators, are not even aware of FSEC duties or the importance of FSEC roles, and then they just miss out the election. So if generally the orientation is almost impossible to do before the August meeting. And then there can be hurricanes or something. So if we just delay by one meeting, and that's not asking much, the new senators get a lot of time to understand the system. Orientation happens. They've already seen it in practice once. And also the old senators get the time to know the new senators. So they have a better, everyone wins in this situation.
Mhm. Mhm. Oh, wait for the.
Scott Butters, math. Is there a guarantee that the elected person will get a full year? In other words, whatever happened with Jeff, we don't want that to happen again. So is there actual language that's pretty much says that?
Yeah, so the Constitution is very specific that term lengths are 1 year. That is actually suboptimal, because what parliamentary procedure recommends is actually put some flexibility into that. Because let's say that somebody starts in August, and then all of a sudden the next August meeting is canceled, you can't have your election, and now you have sort of an interregnum period where there is no president. So actually what we would like to do is go to use the preferred language, which is a year until the successor is elected. And that would be appropriate for the setting, but it, one year from, in the case of this individual, September to September, or provision until the successor is elected, and then they could go September to October. So
is that language already there?
It is not. In the Constitution, that was my question. Yeah, in the Constitution currently it says 1 year, and that has been a bit of an issue. We're going to try. It depends if you have a faculty council meeting. So turn out your friends and family for the council in the spring.
And all the children. Any other questions? So Article 10 of our bylaws state that amendments of our bylaws receive 2/3 of the membership of the Senate. So if there's no further discussion, we now move to the vote. So all those in favor to amend our bylaws as suggested today, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Abstentions? Okay, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So I would like to make a motion to move the provost discussion off the table, so that provost can come and discuss.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, say nay. Okay. Okay, we're very happy to have Provost join us to share the new budget. Thank you for being here.
Is that okay? All right, great. Yeah, thank you, Inessa. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Faculty Senate Executive Committee for inviting me to speak about this. I'd like to frame this. Zero-based budget is something that'll come up here right away, but really what this is about is allocating resources within the university in strategic and efficient ways. And that's really where I'd like to begin. We'll come to the zero-based budget in a moment. We have so many things that we need to do here at LSU that I've heard from all of you about. We need to make sure that we provide raises for our faculty every year. We've not been doing that regularly. We've done it for a couple of years, but then it was irregular in the past. We need to make sure we do that every year, with rare exceptions. We need to make sure that we increase our graduate stipends to a level that is nationally competitive and where students are not having to eat from the food bank and do other things or wait to have wisdom teeth pulled until they can save up enough money. We need to provide stipends that are livable and basic health benefits. We have the scholarship first priorities that we need to make sure that we're addressing. We need to be able to make sure that faculty are hired into departments where enrollment has gone through the roof. We need to make sure that we take care of other basic needs here in the university. One example being make sure that our journal subscriptions in the library are maintained. Journal subscriptions are increasing. I'm sure most, if not all of you know, they're increasing at about 6% per year. Our purchase each year right now is running about $6 million. So that means if we do nothing, then we have to either cut 6% of our journal subscriptions, or we have to find $360,000, and then it's another $360,000 the year after that. So we need a modern system of budgeting in order to do that. And so what we are going to do beginning in FY24, which begins on July 1st of 2023, is to move to a zero-based budget, at least for a small number of years. After that, we may move to something that takes a little less effort than a zero-based budget. But for the first few years, we're going to move to a zero-based budget. And what this practically means, so technically, what a zero-based budget, I'll tell you what a zero-based budget is, and then I will, and then I'll tell you it's going to be a modified version of that because we're not truly zero-based in this regard. The zero-based budget framework is one in which units propose a budget to the administration of the organization and have to justify every single line in that budget. Now, the reason, of course, is obvious that we're not going to go, right to that level because obviously, tenure track and tenure faculty, there's no justification needed for that. Instructors, we're bursting at the seams in terms of our need for instructors, no justification needed for that, etc. But after that, after those, basic core elements, then each unit, and by unit, I'm talking about the units that report to the provost. So there's all the academic side of the house and all units reporting to the provost. So we're talking about deans, in other words, colleges and schools that are run by deans. They will propose to me their budget for FY24, and then that will be due to me on January 20th of 2023. And then we'll have budget hearings following that about 10 days or so later. So late January, early February, and then units will be provided with a budget. In order to do that, there are a few decisions that we have to make now because there are certain decisions about FY24 that are already, headed down the road. So we have to make some decisions now, at least tentatively, until the budgets have been proposed and decided. This also relates to something else that I want to just mention today. It does relate to the zero-based budget, but I'll go into it in just slightly more detail, or at least a little bit of detail in terms of the graduate stipends. We've created a working group. So last year there was a proposal that was put forward to interim Dean Lee and CFO Donna Torres. And I've asked the graduate school led by Jim Spencer. So Jim Spencer and a committee of faculty, graduate students, one person from HR and one person from the budget office. Anessa is on that working group. And I've asked them to provide an implementation plan to bring our graduate stipends up to a minimum of $23,000 per year on a 9-month basis. So summers, if there are grant funds or other funds, would be in addition to that. And in addition to that, to provide benefits, a basic benefit package, healthcare to the graduate students. So that team has started to work. They've met twice. They've met twice, and that will be well. That's actually going to be delivered to me in a few stages. The first stage will be around December 1. We need to make sure that we can provide information to the departments, to all of your departments, so that as you're making decisions, you will be making decisions in the new year about admissions. We need to know some information in advance of that. So I've asked the work group to provide me with enough information about the implementation plan so that we can provide guidance to the departments around the 1st of December regarding, what direction we're going. You're going to need to know more than just what the basic stipends are. You're going to need to have some additional information on that. And then we'll provide a second tranche of information on about February 1st that will be sufficient for the departments to be able to write offer letters for graduate stipends. So you'll have enough information to be able to, write that offer letter to the graduate students and telling them what we're committing to them. And then shortly thereafter in the spring term, the working group will complete its work with a complete and detailed plan on an implementation of minimum stipends that will go into effect on July 1. And so that's essentially what I wanted to communicate to you here today. But I'll be happy to take a couple of questions, which I imagine there will be one or two. So I think there's a roving mic somewhere.
Yeah, there's one. Right.
Great, roll it.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you know who I am. Jeff Rowland, philosophy. So I guess I have a couple of concerns, or maybe just one concern, but it comes out in the grad stipends situation. That's just an example.
Right.
And that is, while I'm fully supportive of everything that you're saying needs to be done, we need to raise the stipends, we need to get the budget under control, we need to provide for library collections, all of that stuff. It seems to me that some of these things actually come under the heading of educational policy. So, for example, the graduate stipends, at least as we heard the proposal last year, the stipends, which I'm in full support of, even though my department doesn't have a PhD program.
Right.
In order to fund those PhD stipends, we're going to have to cannibalize a lot of the other graduate education at the master's level. That seems to me an educational policy issue. And according to the Board of Supervisors regulations, educational policy is under the purview of the faculty, second only to the authority of the board. And so what I'm hearing, and maybe I'm wrong about this, you can tell me, but what I'm hearing is that there are educational policy decisions being made by groups other than the faculty, but without substantive input from the faculty. And I find that very troubling.
Thank you for the comment, Roland. There's no change in policy, at least that I envision right now. It could, there may need to be some down the road. What we're talking about is funding, and that's a separate matter from policy. Obviously, they connect, but we're talking about how much money that we're going to provide to graduate students. It's fully within the purview of the administration of the university to decide departmental budgets, and it'll be and unit budgets, and it'll be from those budgets that the stipends come. So I don't think I see the policy angle on that, although there may be policies that we need to look at. And of course, when that is the case, we'll certainly involve the appropriate faculty members. Regarding the group last year, it involved a number of faculty members, and the group this year also involves faculty. So faculty definitely have input. So you have the mic. Possession is 9/10 of the law.
There was somebody else before me. Hi, Edward Shahana, Department of Sociology. Just had a sort of a general question. So as a former chair of the department, I know the budget is donated. Like social science or humanities units, it's going to be, other than grants, it's going to be faculty, it's going to be salaries, it's going to be graduate student stipends, and then some photocopying money to travel. So my first question is, I'm not sure where the money comes from, given in this particular cases where reallocation means, taking from some and giving to others. Are we reviewing this for the terminal master's degree? And the other thing is, where does it come from? If we already sent out the offer letters February 1st, it's not finalized until July, we can't cut because the offer letters have gone out.
Yeah, you'll have enough. Thank you. You'll have enough information on February 1 to be able to make those decisions. In terms of the budget, so where will the money come from? So part of it will come from the same sources that you're currently providing GAs with, and then there will be some movement of funds within the university. I can tell you now, we're going to deprioritize service GAs. So we're going to focus on graduate assistants that are fulfilling the educational mission of the university, teaching in the classroom. So, for example, both Jim and I have GAs. The budget that we use for those is going to be allocated to departments to increase graduate stipends. So that's an example of the kind of reallocation that we're talking about. Jim, can I add one thing on it?
Yeah, just wait for that.
You better speak for people online. And
Very no people online, just for the recording on the video. So everything you say will be against you later on.
Yes. I should have used like Miranda.
So let me say one addendum to that. It's a very good question. I think the service assistantships is the reallocation pool. What it does mean is that then we'll be placed with a different type of issue in our units and others, which is basically administrative work that needs to get done. And that's a staff issue, not a graduate education issue. So it creates another problem, but it's a problem that's focused on the nature of what needs to get done. And I think that's the next kind of thing we need to deal with.
The fundamental thing that I think we all likely agree on this is that we should not be paying graduate students a stipend that they can't afford to live on in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I'm sure that we can all agree on that. We have to increase this, okay? Morally, we have to do this. And practically as well, because we're not competitive. So that puts it, and we can, at the same time, while we hope to be able to, and in fact, we will have an ask into the legislature for additional funding for this as well. But I don't know that we shouldn't count on that. And as I'm not sure why I'm looking at you, I think it's because you'd asked the kind of this general question, but it's really for everybody. You have a friendly face, so so we have to move forward with this, and that will mean some trade-offs. It's undoubtedly true that will be the case, but we have to. We can't leave the stipends where they are. It's not the right thing to do.
So I've got the mic now. So I'm Pam Blanchard from the School of Education. And I'm wondering how this initiative, which I too support,
yes,
will affect grants and the PIs writing grants. I know currently, I believe we have to pay tuition, I believe, as part of, in addition. So how is the tuition going to be handled in addition to the stipend that these kids get? And, how does that go with the grant?
Right. So what we're talking about in terms of I think there are two relevant things, and Jim, help me out if I miss anything. Well, there's more that's relevant, but there are 2 points that I can say right now. One is we will create a minimum for all GAs at the university. The policy as it stands in terms of, you know, where our hand will be on it will be only on funds that are general education funds. Okay. But all graduate assistants will have to be paid that minimum. There are details that we need to work out with regard to specifically how it will affect grants. And that's something that will have to be done, you know, certainly by the spring, but ideally sooner than that.
I have the mic now. Cassandra Glaspie, College Coast Environment. I'm here for Matt Hyatt. I would like to follow up on the grants issue because there's no money in the grants to pay them health benefits. And so that's something that, you know, we're actively writing into grants for the next 5 years now. So any guidance regarding what percentage that might be would be really, really helpful, because I would hate to have our TAs get health benefits and our students that are working on grants not.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Let's make sure that, let's commit to, I think, a December 1 for the guidance on the GAs. I think we should use that same deadline for guidance on the grants. That's enough time for us to get the basics of it. All you know, what you basically need, as you know, but just for everybody's benefit, is you need to know, well, what the minimum is. I've told you that already, but you also need to know what additional costs there would be on the grant. So, so let's get that done by December 1 as well.
Yeah, Robert Cook from chemistry. Along those lines, one, I think you said a 9-month, and we usually write grants, it's a 12-month.
Yeah,
that we put RAs.
Yeah.
Then there's the, why don't we say fringe, that we then have to put for students where that needs to be covered. And there's a very careful discussion needs to be, I agree that it should be put up, but at one point we're paying tuition, fringe and everything. This means that we could be going into very expensive when the funding agencies are really reducing down their grants. So I agree it needs to be done, but I think a lot of guidance needs to be done very early on as we're writing our grants. If I write a grant now and put it in,
yeah,
I'm still using the old codes, right? Where it almost sounds as it's going to be double per student what I'm putting in at the moment.
So you're putting in $11,500 a year?
No, I'm putting in $27,000 a year.
Yeah, that's pretty close.
But I'm not putting health on that.
Yeah.
And that when I look at my fringe to cover the health,
right?
That really basically, and then the 50%, basically when I ask for salary, I think it's more than double my salary what the government then pays because of the fringe, and then an indirect on top of my salary plus the fringe.
Yeah, the fringe benefits won't be nearly as expensive as ours are. We're a bunch of old people, and our plans are, you know, there's going to be a basic health package for the graduate students. So, you know, you don't have to be worrying about $2,000 a month kind of cost. We're talking about something that's significantly more moderate than that. Jim has some information on this.
Just on that health insurance, I mean, that's one of the big challenges that we face. I think that's in certain looking at our peers, the health insurance is where the thing is out of the norm, right? Not stipends, not, you know, waivers, anything like that. It's the health insurance. Right now, it's calculated at about $3,000 per student per year. So in the 27,000 example, just at current rates, they would have to pay about $3,000 for that. They would bring them down to the 24 stipend level. So that still meets that threshold. But in talking about the way that we think is the best way to plan this out is to actually to control the health insurance costs by not allowing students to waive in and out, by not allowing them that choice, because it creates a situation where we can actually expand the pool and negotiate that. This is the rationale, is to negotiate lower average prices, right? If we control that, we can control the average price and have more predictability on that front. Then what right now we allow students to opt out, right? So if they're under 26 domestic, they're on their parents. If they're married, they got a spouse. Oftentimes, who's that leave? It leaves international students that are footing a very, very high bill. That's why it's $3,000. I think that if we kind of are more deliberate about it, by folding it into what we're investing in with our 1,500 plus graduate assistants, we can negotiate a better average lower rate.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
John King calls back. I just wanted to clarify again what the dates were for when the deans have to have a budget to you and when you're going to review them and implement them.
Yeah, so the proposal from the deans and from others, it's not just the deans, it's the vice presidents, and a few other leaders that report to me. That proposal will be due January 20th, January 20. And then we will have budget hearings 10 days, 2 weeks later. We don't have dates on that yet, but late, it's, basically think of that as the first week of February kind of time frame. And then our decisions will come after that, a few weeks to a month or so after that.
Mustafa Al-Safi, Civil Engineering. Some of the grants are have a cost ceiling. So for these small grants that sometimes we compete in, what would be the solution? Is that we don't compete for them anymore, or what will happen?
Let me just say it this way. The types of costs that we're talking about are pretty common. My previous institution, this was the kind of same kind of numbers that we used at my previous institution. The grants paid for health benefits, and so a lot of institutions do something similar to this. And again, I'm going to come back to the point of it's like gravity. We don't like gravity all the time, but we have to obey the law of gravity. We can't pay our graduate students 10, 12, 13, 15,000 a year and not give them health benefits. So we have to figure it out. I obviously don't have an answer for every particular, grant or other kind of question, but it'll have to fit within the budgets that you have. So if it means, less time on less graduate student time or whatever it is, that'll need to be that way. But we can't continue abusing our graduate students in this way. I need the microphone.
One thing I would like to add is that the state support in Louisiana is not there. Like I was at University of Illinois, the health insurance was covered for the graduate student was covered by the state. I was at Virginia Tech. We didn't have this problem. So I think like we are missing that the state support for research activities and education activity is not up to par with other universities.
That's correct. It isn't. But we're not alone. I came from a state that also, is in the bottom of a lot of rankings. Oregon's not the average of Washington and California. The state of Oregon didn't provide health benefits either for graduate students. We just did this, and I don't mean to reference back to this because I don't mean to reference back to Oregon, except as just an example of that I know it can be done. There was a lot of work that's been put in here at LSU prior to me arriving that says exactly the same thing. Again, I don't have answers to every single thing, but just because the state doesn't provide it doesn't mean that we shouldn't.
Hi, Hannah Belaglavitz from CMDA. I was just wondering about the process of creating the committee to discuss the grad school stipends and how the faculty were chosen for that, which departments they're from, et cetera.
Right. On the grad stipends in particular.
Yes.
Yeah. So I put together a working group, I'm calling it, and I wanted to have faculty representation on it from different parts of the university. I can't have faculty from every college; it would be unwieldy. But we have one faculty member from the College of Music and Dramatic Arts, and we have one faculty member on it from the College of Human Science and education, and then then staff and others on the committee. So it's a cross section. Thanks. Sure.
I'm in agriculture. So this stipend increase is for all or for all graduate students, or just PhD and MFA?
It's for anyone paid as a graduate assistant.
So including Masters of Science and Masters of Arts?
Anyone paid as a graduate assistant, yes.
Got it.
Yeah.
So have you done any sort of back of the envelope simulations, calculations for, given that we're paying more money out of the same pot, like what is going to be the overall reduction in bodies of graduate student bodies to teach classes and things like that?
Jim's done that, yes. Or I mean, the group, not Jim himself. The group that worked last year has done that, yes.
Yeah. So in order to cover the bringing everybody up to the 23,000 for all GA or GTAs and GRAs on institutional funds,
right?
We'll need to get about 180 positions of the service assistantship category, right? And that's a net zero budget, kind of zeroed out the budget. So it's a conversion of about 180 positions into those increased stipends for the teachers and the research GAs. And do we have 180 of those service positions to give? Yes. Got it. I mean, that's why. And just to sort of extend on what Provost was saying earlier, is like we think about what's the priority of a mission of a university like this: undergraduate teaching, scholarship, and knowledge production, right? And then service to the community and state, right? So GAs are most closely tied to these two things, and that's where if we had to triage, which we always do in a tight budget, that's the priorities. It was the rationale of that committee, the initial committee from last year, and just to sort of. This was before Provost Haggerty arrived here in terms of the composition of the committee from last year that developed that memo. It was basically a combination of deans who were on, really front facing on the core mission of undergraduate education. So deans of humanities and social sciences and College of Science, because that's really where the bulk of the gen ed courses reside. The associate dean in CMDA to provide an alternative position in terms of sort of the non-gen ed types of courses. And there are two members that served on that committee from CMDA. And then some, there's myself and Carol Ricks from College of Science, who was associate dean in the graduate school. And then also somebody from budget, somebody from HR, and I may be missing one other person.
Yeah, and we don't have. I can't provide any specifics on this yet. We are planning and doing work to generate revenue to provide additional GAs. And I can't comment on the specifics of that, but we do have some ideas which we do believe will generate revenue, which will then again add back into the numbers again. I think it's on.
Okay. All right. I have two questions. Mandy Lopez from the School of Veterinary Medicine. One, with raising the stipends, how will this impact the graduate student tuition remission? Because that's going to increase substantially as well. And two, do you have any STEM faculty on this committee?
I don't believe there are any STEM faculty. Well, there's a faculty member from kinesiology, but not in a, kinesiology is essentially a STEM field, although it's not often, it's the College of Human Sciences and Education. The challenges are greater in the non-STEM areas because of, for example, College of Science. Perhaps someone from the College of Science can comment on this, but I believe you're already at that minimum. Same in engineering, or pretty close to it. So the bigger challenges are really in the is the non-STEM disciplines. I think there was another question. Did you have another part to that question?
So, yeah.
Tuition remission.
Yeah.
Jim, you're probably better able to talk about that than I am, but I mean, I know the answer, but I think you'll be able to articulate it better.
All I say is I think we need to sort of think about that policy. What you're pointing out is that when we increase the stipends, we increase the base that the percentage tuition remission is calculated on, so it makes grants more expensive. There's a discussion out there that why isn't it benchmarked on the tuition rates, which is fixed, rather so that it wouldn't be affected by up and downs on the minimum side. But I mean, I think all we can say at this point is that this is such an important and core change in the way we allocate resources related to grad education. There's a number of follow-on policies not having to do with institutional funds that then become more important. And I'll say that that's something we're aware of. We know that that's one of the next steps is to kind of resolve that in a way that supports faculty in working with graduate students.
Yeah. One of the things that this will do is decrease the inequity between, which is part of the, that's the design, to decrease the inequity. And as a result of that, there'll be less of a cost differential between different types of funding sources in terms of the tuition remission.
Right. So the reason I was asking about, because our sources of funding are very different. Mm-hmm. So that's the only reason I was asking for that. And especially coming from the veterinary field where it's very, very compressed.
Right.
By the time we pay 40% tuition remission, we've pretty much used up the whole grant. So we don't really have anything to pay for, like, supplies. So research, right. So I that's why that was the basis for that question.
Understood. Thank you, Vandy. Yeah. I think there was a question over here as well.
Well, yeah, when we write a grant, we write it for 12 months. You said 23,000 for 9 months, right? Correct. So that means over 30,000 for 12 months. And I think that comes to some of Mandy's questions as well. I agree with the fact that we need to give our students more money. I think basically across the whole academic, we've been suppressed for a long time in how much we've been paid. 10 years ago, across the board, we got more per person. But I think that this needs to sort of be discussed heavily because that will mean that grad students can cost us, I don't know, once we add that, once we add the healthcare, once we add everything else, this is getting up to 50, 60 postdoc level. And I don't want people to then hire postdocs, not grad students, which would be basically what's happened at other institutes. And then you have a postdoc heavy lab, which is not really the educational thing I think LSU would like to do. So I think that there needs to be a little more discussion on this with those grants, because as Mandy said, and somebody else says, there are fixed costs. And usually if you get $500,000 for 3 years, that's your salary plus all the indirects from the university, plus the students, that comes out to around $10,000 in supplies. And a lot of people can't do that in their research.
Yeah, well, and graduate students can't live on, so
I agree fully there.
Yeah.
I just was saying that the other side to this is that tuition activity, because when I first came to LSU, on grants, we did not pay for tuition.
Right.
So I'm not saying we take student money away from the students.
Right.
There be some other way, and if not, then we'll have to look into it. But yeah, I'm not saying the grad students, no, at all.
And I agree with you, and Jim and I have discussed this, and this is something we'll definitely be looking at.
9/10 of the law. Right, 9/10 of the law.
And Roland is not giving up the microphone.
No, it's been all over the place. No, so if I heard correctly a minute ago, the funding for the increase in stipends is coming from the elimination of a bunch of these service GAs. Did I heard that correctly? So my question is this: take a GA, a master's student, who grades, does not do classroom teaching.
Right.
Is not doing just regular administrative stuff, but teaches, right?
Right.
Is that grades, right? Grades papers, that sort of thing. Does that person count as a service GA or a non-service GA?
That's a teaching assistant.
That counts as teaching. Okay, thank you.
So much for no intense. Where is this?
Got it. You won't be recorded for posterity if you do that.
That's okay.
I can repeat your question.
Okay. It's okay. I would
We're looking at a $10,000 difference between a graduate student and a full-time instructor. So that's discouraging. Yes. Yes. Well, so we are the workhorses as composition instructors, and we are thrilled to see the university growing, especially all the incoming freshmen. But is that disparity in your minds at this point? Because that's a big morale killer for those of us who are struggling to get by as professionals.
Yeah, we need to increase pay across the board. As I apologize earlier. Well, I don't apologize, but maybe sorry, I'm Canadian. It just comes out. When I think of faculty, I said faculty earlier. To me, faculty means everybody, instructors, tenure track, non-tenure track, right? And we need to increase those, everywhere. And the places that I see the biggest needs in terms of faculty pay are at the instructor level and at the associate and the full professor level. Assistant professors are not getting rich. Some of you are probably assistant professors, but we do have to be nationally competitive with assistant professors. And so as a result of that, at least at the starting pay is approximately nationally competitive. I completely agree with you that we do need to, pay our instructors a fair wage. I hope it's not demoralizing. I know, I think, kind of dealing with human nature, that like person A has a low salary, lower than it should be. Person B is in an even worse situation, and someone comes along and provides assistance to that individual in a structural fashion, and we haven't yet been able to solve the problem for person A. That hopefully we can look at that as, that's great for them, and let's make it our turn the next time.
That's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that I just want reassurance to bring back to my department that this is on your mind and it's recognized.
Yes.
And that while everyone in the department will be thrilled for graduate students, we want to see the competitiveness increase, things like that.
Right.
We also would like to be able to pay for things like childcare for meetings after school hours and things like that.
I have a plan for that too, but that's another day. Hey, you're cheating. You're in a different spot. He's hopping around. I saw that.
Yes, and sorry for me, I'm Canadian too, so we say sorry. Just a quick clarification, just to build on Dr. Mann's question. What do you need from my DGS, from the Director of Graduate Studies, by December? Is it just like the number of positions and the nature of them? Or is it, did I misunderstand? Or will we get a directive?
Well, it'll be enough information for you to be able to plan for, what do you need to know in December? You probably need to know, you need to be able to be signaling certain things to graduate students. Like you need to probably be able to have an idea of how many graduate students you'll be able to bring in. You'll need to know things like, are we going to be bringing up current graduate students up to the same level? Things of that nature. I'm not committing to the specifics on those, but it's those kinds of things. Then in February, you're going to need to know, and this is a little bit more obvious, but in February, you need to know exact numbers and exact benefits and the timeline of the commitment and things of that nature. So, yeah, we'll provide as much information in December as we can. Basically, the February one is the real deadline.
Okay.
You bet.
Is this working? Okay, good.
Thanks. Sounds like the last question.
Yeah, I was wondering if we are still trying to decrease the fees for grad students, or we're done decreasing the fees? Because that was a project of one of the previous provosts.
Yeah. They come and go pretty rapidly around here.
I'll take that one because it just came up in our grad advisors meeting, and this actually happened last year. The legislature passed a resolution and law that teaching assistants and research assistants in the state of Louisiana will not pay fees. So we're required as an institution to comply with that, and then there's the question of how we're going to comply to it, either through a waiver or through an increased stipend. I think our preference is for a waiver generally, but that's for everybody else. But the fees are coming off starting fall 2024 by law for RAs and TAs.
I promise there's one last
Okay.
question. I didn't see the hands. Yeah,
Okay,
from Meredith Feldman.
if you promised it,
Yeah,
they can have it.
thank you.
Yeah, Meredith Feldman, stepping out of secretary position and into just history. So Roy, you said that, and moving away from the grant stuff, to back to the zero-based budget model.
Yeah.
You said that the intention was the allocation of resources in strategic and efficient ways. And you talked about, faculty needing to hire departments where enrollment is increased. As I'm sure you know, faculty in arts and humanities find ourselves increasingly nervous as the university ramps up discussion of the Pentagon. And we just don't get mentioned at all. And then when we're talking about reallocation of resources, we get very nervous indeed. Are we talking about departments? What are we talking about?
There's no discussion, or I have no thoughts of doing that. That I can never say never, down the road, but it's certainly not as a part of this at all. What I want to do with this is simply be able to allocate resources to where the greatest need is. And let me talk about and there's another element to this that I'll talk about as part of the response to your question. I'm going to assemble a mostly faculty committee, a couple of students on it as well, to advise me on how to define need in terms of, for resources. What I'm thinking right now in this regard, in a rudimentary fashion is as follows, but I want faculty input on this through, over the next few months. It's student credit hours per faculty in a unit, the numbers of majors per faculty member in a unit, the numbers of degrees awarded per faculty member in a unit, the numbers of research grants, extramural grants that have been awarded in a department, the numbers, the research dollars per faculty member in a department, and those two are meant to balance each other because it's obvious that not every field has access to large dollars, but most fields have access to some kind of extramural support, and also the job market for graduates. Those are the kinds of things that are in my mind right now in terms of where the greatest need are. And if you look around LSU with that kind of lens, there are units that are that have very, very large numbers in those categories. Almost everybody's seen some increases, but there clearly are some that have greater need than others. I mean, that's just the way the universe is, and so that's how I'm thinking about it. And we need a way. But I'm looking for faculty advice on that. And so we need a way to allocate, and a zero-based budget is a way to do that. But I'm not thinking, at all about changes in units and that kinds of things. Not in this context, at least. That I won't say that that'll never happen, but that's not the context of this whatsoever.
Well,
okay. Yeah.
thank you. I just wanted to follow up real quick. We had 15 empty faculty lines. The lines are still there. The money was emptied out when faculty left and reallocated to other units in our college because they're growing.
Right.
We happen to have a very heavy accreditation requirement in our college, and we are down 15 faculty. So all that work to keep us nationally accredited are falling on fewer and fewer people as people leave. And that I would encourage you to consider as part of one of your criteria, because we're stripped down to really a bare minimum. One of our faculty was promoted up into upper administration. We don't have a faculty to replace that person. So we are in a real hard place because of the policies that have been in place over the last 10 years or so. I just want you to consider that you're going to have faculty leaving these departments. I'm retiring because I can't handle it anymore. June 15th is my last day. I just can't handle the pressure that I'm under, and I see my colleagues. So just consider that there's more at play than just those sorts of numbers, that we want to be nationally accredited. We want to be proud of what we're doing, and we can't do it with 15 fewer faculty.
Yeah. So as I said, these are, these are examples of the kinds of things I'm thinking of. And it's exactly that kind of thinking that, that I need help with. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
I just want to say, I just want to say I appreciate the input, the questions. I appreciate the opportunity to do my best to answer them. And I know that everyone in the university, I so value this about a university, is, it's a give and take of ideas. It's an honest exchange, and I know every one of you want the best for LSU, the best for the students, the best for for the people of this region. And I know all of the questions that you're asking, they're good and important and valuable questions. And each of you see, you see the university, and you see the students, and you see the needs in the region. And I know that you're asking the questions from those points of view. So there's no, and I don't mind the difficult questions whatsoever. So, it's my responsibility to do best I can to answer them, to try to be honest here with you, and to manage the university the best I can. But I'll always welcome questions and this kind of back and forth. So thanks a lot.
Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it. Really.
Oregon, I've never received so much applause as very, very warm.
Is there a second? PM. Thank you so much.